Buried beneath the sands of Egypt lie secrets older than the pyramids. Pharaohs erased from history, temples swallowed by the desert, and myths that may rewrite everything we think we know. Today we're unlocking the mysteries of ancient Egypt's vanished wonders, and what we uncover might just change history forever. When you look at Egypt today, you see deserts stretching endlessly, golden dunes shimmering under a merciless sun. But here's the chilling truth. Beneath those sands lie worlds we may never fully uncover. Palaces, temples, and entire cities swallowed whole by time. Imagine it, a colossal temple where once thousands gathered to honor the gods, now reduced to fragments buried under shifting dunes. Walls that once echoed with chants, prayers, and music now sit in silence, crushed beneath centuries of sandstorms. To stand there today, you'd see nothing but emptiness. Yet just a few feet below your shoes may lie carved stones that once held the secrets of an empire. Egypt wasn't always a desert wasteland. In its earliest days, the Nile Valley bloomed with life. Fertile soil, bustling towns, glittering monuments. This was a civilization built to defy death. But deserts are patient. And over thousands of years, wind and sand became Egypt's cruelest enemy. The very landscape that once protected the kingdom from foreign invaders eventually turned into its greatest tomb. Here's the haunting part. Archaeologists believe that what we've uncovered so far, the pyramids, the Valley of the Kings, the grand temples of Luxor and Karnak, is only a fraction of what truly existed. Most of Egypt's wonders are still hidden, silent, waiting. Think about that. The world already marvels at what has been found. Towering pyramids, statues of gods larger than life, gold masks gleaming in museum cases. Yet that may only be the tip of the iceberg. What if the greatest stories of Egypt still lie beneath our feet, unspoken, untouched, and unimagined? But there's another twist. The sands don't just bury, they also protect. Some of Egypt's most breathtaking discoveries, like the tomb of Tutankhamun, survived for thousands of years precisely because shifting dunes hid them from grave robbers. In a way, the desert is both destroyer and guardian, erasing some treasures while fiercely preserving others. Picture a storm raging across the desert night. Winds howling, grains of sand scraping against stone. A colossal statue, once standing proudly, collapses in silence. Within days it disappears, consumed by waves of sand that roll like an ocean. 1,000 years later, nobody remembers it ever existed, unless someone dares to dig, unless someone stumbles upon a clue. And clues do emerge, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. A farmer digging a well, a child tripping over a strange stone, a construction crew halting their work after unearthing something that shouldn't be there. Entire cities have resurfaced this way, rising from oblivion because the desert finally, reluctantly, gave them back. But here's what should make you pause. How much remains that the sands will never return? How many temples, libraries, and monuments have been erased beyond recovery? What knowledge, what wisdom, what warnings have we lost forever? Because the desert chose silence over memory. Egypt built for eternity, yet eternity is cruel. The pharaohs believed they could carve their names into stone and live forever, but even stone breaks, crumbles, and sinks beneath shifting ground. Their dream of immortality is still there, buried, but only if we're lucky enough to find it. And so, the sands of Egypt are more than scenery. They are storytellers. They hide, they reveal, and they remind us of a sobering truth. No matter how mighty a civilization, time always wins. But before time claimed Egypt's wonders, there was a reason they were built in the first place. The towering pyramids, the vast temples, the colossal statues. They weren't just stone, they were dreams of eternity. The pharaohs weren't building monuments for us. They were building for themselves, and for their journey into the afterlife. Which raises the question, why did the pharaohs dream so desperately of immortality? Close your eyes and picture this. A colossal pyramid, rising out of the desert, its white limestone casing gleaming so brightly in the sun that travelers miles away described it as if it were made of light itself. That wasn't just architecture. That was ambition carved into stone. Pharaohs didn't build to impress. They built to live forever. To the ancient Egyptians, death wasn't an ending. It was a journey, a passage from one life into another, the eternal afterlife. But here's the catch. You couldn't simply drift into eternity. You had to earn it. You had to prepare for it. And no one believed this more fiercely than the kings of Egypt. From the moment a pharaoh took the throne, his true work began, building his tomb, not because he was obsessed with death, but because he was obsessed with what came after. Every stone placed, every chamber carved, every inscription etched, was meant to guarantee one thing: his soul would live on forever, remembered by gods and men alike. But let's get real. These weren't just tombs, they were power statements. A pyramid wasn't only a gateway to eternity, it was a message to everyone who looked at it. I was here, I mattered, and even the gods cannot erase me. Take Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza. That single monument contains over 2 million blocks of stone, each weighing tons. Think about the audacity of that. No cranes, no modern machines, just human hands, sweat and a vision so massive it still humbles us today. Why? Because Khufu didn't want to be forgotten. For him, the greatest fear wasn't death, it was obscurity. And yet, that's where the story gets tragic. Because for all the pharaoh's dreams of immortality, time betrayed them. Many of their names, once sung in hymns and carved in gold, are now barely remembered. Some are lost entirely. Their tombs looted, their mummies destroyed, their glory swallowed by the same sands they tried so hard to defy. But still, the dream lingers. Inside those tombs, the walls were alive with stories. Hieroglyphs told of divine journeys. Spells from the Book of the Dead were inscribed to guide the king's soul through the perils of the underworld. Even food, furniture, and treasures were buried with him, because the afterlife wasn't just spiritual. To Egyptians, it was real, physical, and eternal. The pharaoh would need every comfort he had in life to thrive in death. Now imagine being an ordinary Egyptian worker, standing in the blazing sun, hauling stones for years, maybe decades, all for a tomb you'd never step inside. Why did they do it? Fear, reverence, and belief. The pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a god. His survival in the afterlife meant the survival of Egypt itself. But here's the darker side. That dream of eternity demanded sacrifice. Countless lives were consumed building these monuments. Entire economies bent to serve one man's passage into the afterlife. For every glorious pyramid, there were thousands of nameless workers who died carving their king's eternity. They weren't remembered. They weren't buried in gold. They vanished, their blood mixing with the sand that still clings to the stones today. And yet, the pharaoh's dream worked, didn't it? We are still talking about them. Thousands of years later, millions of visitors stand in awe before the pyramids. Even if their names are faint, their vision still towers above the desert. Their immortality in some twisted way became real. But not all stones are eternal. Not every monument survived. Some carry darker stories of curses, of collapse, of mysteries so deep they still make us shiver. Because behind the grandeur of these eternal dreams lies something far more unsettling, the belief that these monuments were more than tombs. They were portals, and sometimes those portals came with warnings. You've heard the whispers, haven't you? The legends of the pharaoh's curse. Tales of explorers who dared to disturb Egypt's tombs, only to meet sudden and terrifying deaths. Coincidence? Or did the stones themselves carry warnings from the afterlife? Let's begin with the most famous case. In 1922, Howard Carter uncovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, a discovery that electrified the world. Gold, jewels, and treasures beyond imagination lay untouched for over 3,000 years. But within months, strange deaths followed. Lord Carnarvon, Carter's benefactor, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite. Newspapers screamed, "The curse of the pharaoh strikes again." Soon after, other members of the excavation team fell ill or died unexpectedly. Were these just accidents? Or did the ancients truly inscribe their wrath into stone? Here's what we know. Ancient Egyptians believed their tombs were sacred gateways, protected not only by walls of limestone, but by spells, incantations, and even physical traps. Hieroglyphs warned, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." That wasn't just poetry, that was a threat. A declaration meant to terrify grave robbers, invaders, or anyone foolish enough to cross into forbidden chambers. And for good reason. Tomb robbery was rampant in ancient times. Pharaohs filled their burial chambers with unimaginable wealth: gold masks, chariots, statues, even entire boats for the afterlife. To the poor and desperate, these tombs were irresistible, so the Egyptians fought back the only way they knew how, with fear, with curses, and with the belief that divine punishment awaited intruders. But maybe it wasn't just superstition. Scientists now suggest that some of these curses had a deadly, very real explanation. Imagine opening a tomb sealed for 3,000 years. Inside, the air is stale, toxic, filled with mold spores, bacteria, and even deadly gases trapped within. Breathe it in, and your lungs could collapse. What looks like a curse may have been ancient bioweapons, born by accident, waiting in silence for centuries. Still, there's something chilling about how precise these curses seemed. Explorers and archaeologists who mocked the warnings sometimes died within days. Others, who treated the tombs with respect, lived long, untouched. Was that science, or something else entirely? Think about it. To the Egyptians, death was not the end. Their kings lived on as gods. Disturbing their rest wasn't just theft, it was cosmic treason, and treason demanded punishment. But here's the darker truth. The real curse wasn't only on the intruders, it was on the pharaohs themselves. For all their efforts to secure eternity, many tombs were still plundered, golden coffins smashed, mummies burned, sacred texts pricked apart. The very people who built these monuments often turned against them in desperate times. Priests, officials, even royal guards stole from the tombs they once swore to protect. Egypt's greatest kings were robbed not by strangers, but by their own people, their eternal dreams shattered by human greed. And yet, the myth of the curse survives, because it plays on something we all feel: the fear of crossing boundaries we shouldn't. The fear that some doors are meant to stay closed. Picture yourself holding a torch, stepping into a chamber, untouched for millennia. The air heavy, the silence absolute. Before you, a sarcophagus gleams in the dark, hieroglyphs carved across its lid warn of doom. Do you dare lift it? Do you risk awakening whatever waits beyond? That tension between discovery and dread is what has kept the pyramids alive in our imagination. They are not just monuments, they are mysteries wrapped in fear. But curses and tombs are only part of the story, because while the pharaohs built for eternity, they also believed they were never truly alone. They ruled not just as kings, but as chosen of the gods. And those gods, powerful and terrifying, walked hand in hand with Egypt's destiny. In ancient Egypt, the line between mortal and divine wasn't a line at all, it was a blur. Pharaohs weren't just kings, they were gods in flesh, living bridges between heaven and earth. And the gods they served, they weren't distant or invisible. To the Egyptians, they were everywhere, in the sun, in the Nile, in the desert winds that howled at night. Imagine waking up as an ordinary Egyptian farmer. The first rays of the morning sun strike your face, and you don't just see light, you see Ra, the sun god, sailing his golden boat across the sky. The river you fetch water from isn't just water, it's the lifeblood of Hapi, the Nile god. Even death itself isn't an end, but a passage guided by Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of souls. Life in Egypt was a constant negotiation with the divine. Every harvest, every flood, every birth and death depended on gods you could not see but dared never ignore. And above all stood the pharaoh, believed to be the son of Ra himself. When he spoke, it wasn't just law, it was divine will. To defy him was to defy the cosmos. But here's the chilling part. These gods weren't gentle. They demanded loyalty, sacrifice, and obedience. They could bless you with abundance or curse you with famine. The annual flooding of the Nile was celebrated as a gift of renewal. But when the river ran dry, people whispered that Egypt had angered its gods. Take Osiris, god of the afterlife. His myth was central to Egyptian belief. Murdered by his jealous brother Set, resurrected by his wife Isis, Osiris became ruler of the underworld. Every Egyptian hoped to follow his path, to die, to be judged, and to rise again. But judgment was terrifying. Your heart would be weighed against the feather of truth. If it was lighter, you entered paradise. If heavier, it was devoured by Ammit, the soul eater, eternal death, oblivion. And who ensured you passed this test? The rituals, the prayers. The offerings left at temples that rose like mountains along the Nile. Ordinary Egyptians gave grain, cattle, even jewelry to appease the gods. Priests conducted ceremonies day and night, burning incense, chanting hymns, feeding statues as if they were alive. To the people, these statues weren't just symbols. They were the gods, living inside stone and gold. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. The gods weren't just worshipped, they were feared. Imagine the storm god Set, raging across the desert with winds that could strip flesh from bone. Or Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, unleashed to punish humanity until rivers ran red with blood. To anger the gods was to invite chaos itself. Even love carried divine weight. The goddess Hathor embodied music, joy, and fertility, but also vengeance. She could bless lovers with passion or curse them with madness. Every part of life, birth, death, farming, war, love, was under the shadow of divine eyes. And at the center of it all stood the pharaoh, cloaked in symbols of divinity, the crook and flail of Osiris, the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the Ankh of eternal life. When he stepped into a temple, he didn't come as a man, he came as a god. To doubt him was unthinkable. But here's the paradox. If the pharaoh was a god, then why did he need such massive tombs, elaborate rituals, and constant offerings to survive the afterlife? Why did a god fear death? The truth is simple and heartbreaking. For all their power, Egypt's gods were a mirror of humanity, filled with jealousy, love, rage, and fear. And the pharaohs, no matter how divine, were still men trying desperately to escape the same fate as everyone else. The silence of the grave. This is why Egypt's monuments weren't just stone. They were prayers. They were bargaining chips with eternity, built to bribe the gods into granting immortality. And many of those prayers, those bargains, still lie hidden in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, where darkness and silence conceal the secrets of Egypt's mightiest rulers. Picture a barren desert valley, its cliffs rising like jagged walls of stone. The silence so heavy, you can almost hear your own heartbeat. This is the Valley of the Kings, the eternal resting place of Egypt's greatest rulers. But don't let the emptiness fool you. Beneath your feet lies a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and secrets, carved into the rock to hide kings from death, thieves, and even time itself. Why here? Why this valley? The pharaohs learned a hard lesson from the pyramids. The grander the tomb, the bigger the target. Pyramids screamed wealth, and grave robbers listened. Gold was stripped, mummies were burned. The dream of eternity was shattered again and again. So, in the New Kingdom, Egypt tried a different plan. They abandoned the pyramids and dug their tombs into hidden cliffs west of the Nile. It was genius in theory, a secret burial ground, camouflaged by desert silence, no towering pyramid to lure thieves, just rock, dust, and shadows. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. The Valley of the Kings became a theater of brilliance and betrayal. Tombs here weren't simple graves. They were journeys into the underworld, carved in stone. Long corridors led deep into the earth, walls covered in spells and scenes from the Book of the Dead. Gods with animal heads stretched across the chambers, guiding the king's soul through fire, water, and darkness. The ceilings glittered with stars, entire constellations painted to light the pharaoh's path. And the treasures, imagine stepping into a tomb lit only by flickering torchlight. Gold glinting from every corner. Thrones, statues, weapons, jewelry, all meant to serve the king beyond death. Each object a story, a symbol of his power carried into eternity. But here's the haunting truth. Most of these tombs were looted long before archaeologists ever found them. The very workers who carved the tombs often returned under cover of night, desperate and hungry, prying gold from the walls they had built. Officials who swore loyalty to the pharaoh smuggled treasures out of sacred chambers. Even priests, charged with protecting the dead, stripped mummies of jewels to survive hard times. It's heartbreaking to realize that many pharaohs, the gods of their age, didn't rest in peace. They were betrayed by their own people, their bodies defiled, their dreams of eternity stolen piece by piece. And yet one miracle broke through the despair: Tutankhamun's tomb. When Howard Carter uncovered it in 1922, it was like stepping back in time. Unlike others, this tomb had escaped the robbers, hidden under rubble and forgotten for centuries. Inside, the boy king lay surrounded by treasures so breathtaking they stunned the modern world. The golden mask, the chariots, the jeweled daggers. For the first time, we could see Egypt's dream of eternity exactly as it was meant to be. But Tutankhamun was just one pharaoh, among dozens buried here. Imagine what else lies undiscovered, sealed behind stone and sand. Archaeologists believe many tombs are still hidden, waiting to tell their stories. Some may hold queens erased from history, others may guard treasures beyond imagination. The valley is not silent, it's whispering. And here's the eerie thought. If a single boy king's tomb could dazzle the world, what would the untouched resting places of Egypt's greatest rulers reveal? Ramses the Great, Seti I, Thut. Their shadows still linger, their secrets buried in the cliffs. But not every ruler was remembered. Not every name survived. Some were deliberately erased, their faces chiseled off walls, their monuments smashed. One queen, in particular, dared to rise above the system, and for that, her memory was hunted. For centuries, the throne of Egypt belonged to men, kings, warriors, and pharaohs who claimed to be gods in flesh. But then came a woman who refused to accept her limits. Hatshepsut, the queen who crowned herself pharaoh. Her story begins not with war, but with ambition carved quietly in stone. She was the daughter of a king, the wife of a king, the stepmother of a king. By blood, she stood close to power, but by tradition, she wasn't supposed to hold it. Women could rule as regents. Yes, caretakers for young heirs until they came of age. But to take the title of pharaoh, to wear the false beard, the crown, and stand as Egypt's god-king, that was forbidden. And yet, Hatshepsut did the unthinkable. When her stepson, Thutmose III, was too young to rule, she took control as regent. But she didn't step aside when he grew older. Instead, she declared herself pharaoh, not queen, not regent, but pharaoh in her own right. She even reshaped her image, commissioning statues of herself as a man with broad shoulders and the iconic false beard of kings. She rewrote the rules and dared the world to challenge her. But power wasn't just about appearances. Hatshepsut proved herself through action. Instead of leading Egypt into endless wars, she built prosperity through trade and architecture. She reopened trade routes long abandoned, bringing wealth and exotic goods back to the Nile. Incense, ivory, gold, and treasures from the mysterious land of Punt, a kingdom so distant and mythical it still baffles historians today. And her monuments, they weren't just structures, they were declarations. The most stunning of all was her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. Rising against the cliffs in sweeping terraces and columns, it still stands today as one of Egypt's greatest architectural achievements. Every wall sings her name, her divine birth, her claim to legitimacy. She carved herself into eternity, daring time itself to erase her. But time and her enemies tried anyway. After her death, something sinister happened. Her statues were smashed. Her name was chiseled off monuments. Her images were defaced. Her legacy buried. For centuries it was as if she had never ruled at all. Some believe her stepson, Thutmose III, sought revenge, erasing her memory to reclaim his throne's glory. Others think priests couldn't tolerate a woman breaking divine order. Imagine the silence of history. A ruler once hailed as pharaoh, stripped of identity, erased like dust in the wind. For nearly 3,000 years the world forgot her. Only fragments survived, whispering that a powerful woman once sat on Egypt's throne. But her erasure failed completely. Today, Hatshepsut is remembered not as an anomaly, but as one of Egypt's greatest rulers. She outsmarted her enemies, outbuilt her rivals, and outshone kings who tried to silence her. She proved that power bows to determination, not gender. And yet her story raises haunting questions. How many rulers were lost forever, their names swallowed by chisels and sand? How many pharaohs, queens and dreamers vanished without a trace, buried by enemies who feared their memory? One king in particular faced that same fate, a man so radical, so heretical, that history nearly erased him too. He didn't just claim the throne, he tried to rewrite religion itself. Imagine a king so bold, so radical, that he tried to erase the gods themselves. This was Akhenaten, the pharaoh who shattered tradition, built a city for his new faith, and plunged Egypt into chaos. For nearly 2,000 years, Egypt had worshipped a vast pantheon: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Anubis, gods who ruled every corner of life and death. Temples hummed with prayers, priests controlled wealth and knowledge, and the divine order seemed unshakable. But Akhenaten looked at this world and declared, no, one God only. The god he chose was Aten, the sun disk, not Ra, the great falcon sun god, not the traditional lords of creation, just Aten, the glowing orb in the sky, the giver of light and life. Akhenaten claimed Aten was the one true god, and he, the pharaoh, was Aten's chosen prophet on earth. It was nothing less than a revolution. He closed temples of other gods, stripped priests of power, and forced Egypt to worship Aten alone. In doing so, he crushed the foundations of a belief system that had guided Egyptians for millennia, and he didn't stop there. To cement his vision, Akhenaten built an entire city from scratch. Akhetaten, today known as Amarna. In just a few years, palaces, temples, and sprawling streets rose from the desert. It was unlike anything Egypt had seen before. Wide, open, drenched in sunlight, the city itself was a hymn to Aten, with open-air temples that allowed the sun's rays to fall directly on worshippers. But there was something even stranger. The art of Akhenaten's time broke every rule of Egyptian tradition. Kings had always been depicted as godlike, perfect, muscular, eternal. Akhenaten, however, was shown with elongated limbs, wide hips, a soft belly, and a strangely feminine face. Some say he had a disease, others believe the style was symbolic, showing him as both man and woman, the father and mother of Egypt, embodying Aten's life-giving power. It was radical, it was brilliant, but it was doomed. The people hated this revolution. The priests despised it. The old gods did not vanish quietly. To ordinary Egyptians, Aten was distant, abstract. Unlike Osiris, who promised rebirth, or Isis, who comforted the dead, Aten gave no afterlife, no personal salvation, only sunlight. For a nation built on rituals of death and eternity, Akhenaten's faith felt hollow. When Akhenaten died, his dream city crumbled. Within a few years, his temples were abandoned, his city deserted. The priests returned in force, restoring the old gods. Akhenaten's name was smeared from monuments, his memory damned, even his body vanished. Archaeologists still argue whether his mummy has ever been found, and yet his legacy refuses to die. Some scholars whisper that Akhenaten's vision of one god foreshadowed the birth of monotheism itself. centuries before Judaism, Christianity, or Islam? Was he a madman drunk on power, or a prophet centuries ahead of his time? One thing is certain, Akhenaten tried to change eternity, but eternity fought back. And standing at the edge of his fallen city, another mystery rises. A figure older than Akhenaten, older than the Valley of the Kings, older even than the pyramids, beneath the blazing Egyptian sun. A colossal figure rises from the desert sand, a lion's body, a human face, eyes that have stared across millennia. This is the Great Sphinx of Giza, the oldest and most enigmatic monument in Egypt. It is a creature of riddles, not just the mythic riddle of the Sphinx in Greek legend, but a riddle of history, stone and time. Who built it? Why? And what secrets still lie beneath its pores? At first glance, the Sphinx seems eternal, carved in harmony with the pyramids beside it. But here's the mystery. While the pyramids are well documented, the Sphinx is not. Ancient texts barely mention it. Pharaohs left no clear record claiming its creation. For a monument so massive, so iconic, its silence in history is almost deafening. So scholars began to ask, could the Sphinx be far older than we think? The traditional story is this. Around 2500 BCE, Pharaoh Khafre, builder of the second largest pyramid at Giza, carved the Sphinx from a single ridge of limestone. Its face, many believe, is his own, a fusion of king and lion, symbol of power, protection, and divine authority. But cracks, literal cracks, began to shake this theory. In the 20th century, geologists studying the Sphinx noticed something strange. The erosion on its body wasn't caused by sand and wind, as you'd expect in a desert. Instead, the patterns looked like water erosion, deep vertical channels carved by centuries of heavy rainfall. But here's the catch. Giza hasn't seen that kind of rainfall in thousands of years. The last time Egypt experienced such wet conditions was over 7,000 years ago, long before Khafre, long before the pyramids, long before dynastic Egypt itself. If true, this would rewrite history. It would mean the Sphinx could be thousands of years older than the pyramids, older than writing, older than recorded civilization, built by a culture lost to time. Mainstream Egyptologists reject this idea fiercely. They argue the erosion could still be explained by centuries of weathering and floods from the Nile. They insist the face of the Sphinx matches Khafre, and point to surrounding temples that seem tied to his reign. But the controversy refuses to die. Even the face itself adds to the puzzle. Some studies claim the head is too small for the body, suggesting it was recarved from an earlier image, perhaps a lion or even a different god. If so, who stood here before Khafre, and why change it? Then there's the question of what lies beneath. In the 1990s, ground-penetrating radar scans revealed cavities and tunnels under the Sphinx. Some researchers claim they found a hidden chamber between its pores, a so-called hall of records, spoken of in legends. According to myths, this hall contains the wisdom of a lost civilization, maybe even Atlantis. Egyptian authorities dismiss this as fantasy, yet excavations beneath the Sphinx remain restricted, fueling speculation. Why not explore further? Why keep the secrets buried? And the Sphinx continues to guard its silence. Through the ages, it has suffered. Its nose is famously gone, broken in antiquity. Its beard lies scattered in museums across the world. For centuries, it was buried to its shoulders in sand, only its head peering above the dunes. Entire generations walked past, unaware that the body of a lion slept beneath their feet. But despite the damage, despite the mystery, the Sphinx endures, watching, waiting, its gaze locked on the horizon where the sun rises, as if guarding the passage between life and death, time and eternity. And here lies the heart of the riddle. Was the Sphinx a monument to a single king, Khafre's boast carved in stone? Or was it something far greater, a relic of an earlier, forgotten world, whispering of civilizations erased from history? We may never know for certain, but maybe that's the point. The Sphinx was designed to outlast memory itself, to embody mystery, to remind every generation that the past is never fully known, that the sands of time always hide more than they reveal. Stand before it, and you feel that truth. The desert wind brushes your face. The stone eyes look through you, as if asking a question you cannot answer, a riddle not of words, but of existence. The pyramids may tell us of power, the tombs may tell us of kings, but the Sphinx tells us of silence, the silence of history, the silence of secrets buried deep, and yet its presence echoes across cultures. In Greece, the Sphinx became a monster who strangled travelers with riddles. In later ages, it was a symbol of mystery itself. Always, the Sphinx whispers the same challenge: what do you truly know of the past? The truth is, the Sphinx may never yield its secrets. Maybe the chambers beneath are empty. Maybe the erosion is just wind and sand. Or maybe, just maybe, it guards a truth so old, so vast, that our history books can't contain it. One thing is certain: the Sphinx will outlast us all. Long after cities crumble, long after names are forgotten, the lion with the human face will still sit in the sand, watching the sunrise, keeping its riddle. And as the sun sets on this monument of mystery, one final question remains. If the Sphinx hides truths older than Egypt itself, what else might still lie buried, waiting for the desert to give it back? Before the pyramids rose, before the pharaohs ruled, before even the first hieroglyph was carved into stone, there was the Nile. Egypt is not Egypt without it. A narrow ribbon of life cutting through an endless desert. The river was the heartbeat of the ancient world. Without it, there would be no civilization here. With it, Egypt became the cradle of kings. The Nile was more than water. It was miracle. Each year, like clockwork, the river flooded its banks. Muddy waters spilled across the land, leaving behind rich black soil. That soil grew wheat, barley, vegetables, food that fed millions. While other deserts starved, Egypt flourished. Herodotus, the Greek historian, famously said, "Egypt is the gift of the Nile." And he was right. But here's the deeper truth. The Nile wasn't just a source of life. It was also a source of death, fear, and awe. The floods were unpredictable. Too low, and famine would grip the land. Too high, and homes, fields, even entire villages could vanish beneath the rushing waters. For ordinary farmers, the Nile was a blessing and a curse. Their lives balanced on its moods, and so the river became divine. The Egyptians didn't just farm from it, they worshipped it. They saw the Nile as a god. Happy, the spirit of the flood. Each year, priests performed ceremonies, offering prayers and sacrifices to ensure the waters would rise just enough to sustain life. To the Egyptians, Happy was not a myth. He was as real as the sun in the sky. But the Nile was more than a god of life. It was also a road to the afterlife. Look at Egypt's map. Notice something. The Nile flows north, from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean. But the Egyptians believed the true journey was the other way, southward, upstream toward the mysterious lands where the river was born. They called it the path of the dead. When a pharaoh died, his body was carried west of the Nile, into the desert, where tombs and pyramids awaited. Why the way? Because that's where the sun set, and with it, life itself. The Nile became not just a river of water, but a border between life and death. Imagine standing on its banks at night, the stars above shimmering, the desert stretching endlessly, the river flowing black and silent. To an ancient Egyptian, this wasn't just nature, it was eternity flowing by. And yet, the Nile also carried secrets. Beneath its surface swam dangers, crocodiles as long as boats, hippos with jaws strong enough to shatter bone. Crossing the river was not a casual thing. To farmers and fishermen, the Nile was both ally and predator. The same water that fed you could kill you in a heartbeat. But perhaps the most mysterious part of the Nile was its origin. To the ancients, the source of the Nile was unknowable. They imagined it sprang from the heavens, or from underground caverns filled with magic. Some said it flowed from the tears of the goddess Isis, mourning for her slain husband Osiris. Others believed it was the very blood of the gods themselves. For centuries, this mystery endured. Even Roman emperors sent expeditions to find its source. None succeeded. It wasn't until the 19th century that explorers traced it back to the highlands of East Africa. To the Egyptians, though, the Nile was eternal. It didn't need a beginning because it was life itself. But the river carried more than food and faith. It carried power. Whoever controlled the Nile controlled Egypt. Pharaohs taxed farmers based on how high the floodwaters reached. Temples measured and recorded its levels with sacred instruments called nilometers. Even today you can see these carved stone wells on the riverbanks, once used to predict famine or prosperity. In this way, the Nile wasn't just natural, it was political. It fed empire, it crowned kings, it justified wars. And through it all, the river kept flowing. Empires rose, temples crumbled, dynasties fell, but the Nile endured. Silent, patient, eternal. The Nile is a paradox, a giver and a taker, a god and a destroyer, a path to life and a path to death. Stand beside it even today, and you feel it, the breeze carrying whispers of the past. The same waters that once reflected the faces of pharaohs, priests, slaves and soldiers. The same currents that bore funeral boats toward the Valley of the Kings. The same flood that once decided whether a family ate or starved. For Egypt, the Nile was never just geography. It was destiny. And in the shadow of its eternal waters, one truth becomes clear. Egypt didn't shape the Nile. The Nile shaped Egypt. But while the river gave Egypt its soul, another force seized its heart. A force more dangerous than famine, more powerful than kings, a force that ruled not with water but with faith. The priests. Pharaohs wore the crowns. Pharaohs built the monuments. Pharaohs claimed to be gods. But in truth, they were never the only ones in control. Behind the golden mask of kingship stood another force, quieter, but just as powerful. The priests. To the people of Egypt, religion wasn't separate from life. It was life. Every sunrise, every flood of the Nile, every breath of wind carried divine meaning. And the priests were the translators of that meaning. They spoke the language of the gods. They alone knew the rituals, the prayers, the secrets hidden in temples and tombs. And that gave them power, a power even pharaohs sometimes feared. Take the god Amun. Once a local deity, Amun rose to supreme importance in Thebes. Over centuries, his cult grew richer and stronger. His temple at Karnak became one of the largest religious complexes in the world. And with every offering, every sacrifice, every donation of land or treasure, the priests of Amun gained wealth, wealth that rivaled the pharaoh himself. By the new kingdom, the high priests of Amun controlled 1/3 of Egypt's land and resources. Imagine that. 1/3 of an empire's power in the hands of men who never wore crowns, never led armies, but commanded loyalty through faith. And with wealth came ambition. Pharaohs might build pyramids, but without priests, the rituals of eternity were meaningless. No priest, no afterlife. The king himself depended on them. This gave priests leverage, the ability to shape politics, crown kings, and even erase their names from history. And that's exactly what happened. One of the most dramatic betrayals came during the reign of Akhenaten. He dared to challenge the priests of Amun. He shut down their temples. He proclaimed a new god, the Aten, the sun disk, as the only divine power. In one stroke, he tried to break the monopoly of the priesthood. But revolutions breed enemies. When Akhenaten died, the priests struck back. They erased his legacy. His city was abandoned, his statues smashed. His name was cursed. The priests made sure his vision would be remembered, not as a bold experiment, but as heresy. And this wasn't the only time priests pulled the strings. In the late New Kingdom, the high priest Herihor went further. He didn't just control temples, he declared himself ruler of Upper Egypt. Imagine that, a priest wearing a pharaoh's crown. It was a quiet coup, a takeover without bloodshed. The gods had become the kings. For the ordinary Egyptian, this was confusing, maybe terrifying. Who held true power? The man on the throne or the man in the temple? Was loyalty owed to the living pharaoh or to the eternal gods he claimed to serve? But here's the dark side. Power corrupts, even when cloaked in holiness. Some priests became rich landowners, collecting taxes, exploiting farmers, hoarding treasure. While the people toiled, temples grew fat with gold. Yet the priests maintained their grip with one weapon stronger than any sword: fear. Fear of the gods, fear of eternal punishment, fear of being erased from the afterlife. For an Egyptian, the afterlife was everything, and if the priests could deny it, who would dare oppose them? Even pharaohs learned to bow. Some married their daughters into the priesthood to buy loyalty. Others lavished temples with gifts to keep priests appeased. In a land where the divine was woven into every grain of sand, the priests were gatekeepers of eternity. But this dependence was also Egypt's weakness. When the priesthood grew too strong, the state fractured. When temples drained wealth, the economy weakened. The very force that gave Egypt unity also sowed the seeds of its decline. And betrayal was never far away. Kings who angered the priesthood found their legacies destroyed. Tombs were robbed, names chiseled out, achievements credited to others. To be forgotten was the worst fate an Egyptian could imagine, a second death. And the priests had the power to make it happen. Think about that. The pharaoh, who claimed to be a god, could still be silenced by men in robes. It's a chilling reminder. Empires don't always fall by invasion. Sometimes they rot from within. And in the shadows of temple walls, betrayal brewed. Kings fought wars abroad, but at home priests plotted. The balance between crown and temple tipped back and forth, like the Nile's flood. When it was steady, Egypt thrived. When it broke, Egypt crumbled. The story of the priests is the story of hidden power. Power without armies, power without thrones. Power that lived in whispers, rituals, and fear. And when Egypt finally fell to foreign conquerors, the priests endured. The temples outlasted dynasties. Even in ruins today, their walls still echo with prayers carved in stone. The kings are gone, but the priests' shadows remain. So next time you look at a pyramid, remember this: it wasn't just a king who built it. It was priests who blessed it, who guarded its secrets, who ensured its legacy. And sometimes it was priests who destroyed it. Because in Egypt, the gods were eternal, but so was human ambition. And soon, that ambition would meet a force too great to stop: the armies of foreign kings who hungered for Egypt's treasures. Egypt once seemed eternal. The Nile flowed. The temples shone with gold. The pharaohs claimed they would live forever, but nothing lasts forever. The priests may have pulled strings inside Egypt, but outside its borders, new powers were rising, hungry, ruthless, determined. And they had their eyes fixed on the jewel of the ancient world, Egypt itself. It started with the Persians. In 525 BCE, Cambyses II, king of Persia, marched into Egypt. To him, Egypt wasn't a holy land. It was territory to be taken, wealth to be seized. His soldiers stormed through the Nile Delta, shattering Egypt's pride. And here's the irony: the priests, who once held such power, now bent the knee to a foreign king. They had little choice. Survival meant compromise. The temples stayed open. The rituals continued. But now they honored a conqueror instead of a pharaoh. For the people of Egypt, it must have felt like betrayal. The gods still demanded worship. The priests still demanded offerings. But the ruler was no longer one of their own. Egypt's soul was slipping away. Then came the Greeks. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great swept into Egypt like a storm, and unlike the Persians, he played a clever game. He didn't just conquer Egypt, he embraced it. He marched to the temple of Amun at Siwa, where priests declared him the son of a god. Alexander understood what the pharaohs had known all along. Power wasn't just about armies, it was about divinity. The Egyptians accepted him, but he didn't stay. His empire stretched too far, and when he died, generals carved it up. Egypt fell to the Ptolemies, a Greek dynasty that ruled for nearly 300 years. On the surface, the Ptolemies became pharaohs. They wore Egyptian crowns, they built Egyptian temples, they spoke the language of the gods. But behind the golden masks, they were still foreigners. Their court spoke Greek, their soldiers were Macedonian, and their loyalty was never to the Nile, but to their own power. And yet, something remarkable happened. Egypt didn't vanish. Instead, it transformed. Temples like Philae and Edfu still rose in honor of Isis and Horus. The old gods lived on, even under foreign rule. Cleopatra herself, the last of the Ptolemies, spoke Egyptian and presented herself as the goddess Isis reborn. She tried to bridge two worlds, Greek and Egyptian, East and West. But fate had other plans. Rome was rising. And when Rome turned its gaze to Egypt, the outcome was inevitable. After Cleopatra's tragic death in 30 BCE, Egypt became a Roman province. Think about that. For 3,000 years, Egypt had ruled itself. Pharaoh after pharaoh, dynasty after dynasty, and now in a single lifetime, it was reduced to a trophy of empire. The Romans drained Egypt's grain to feed their legions. The temples were maintained, but only as symbols. The priests still performed rituals, but their power was hollow. Pharaohs were gone forever, and with them, Egypt's soul began to wither. Yes, the pyramids still stood. Yes, the Nile still flowed. But the magic, the unbroken chain of tradition, was broken. For the first time in millennia, Egypt was no longer master of its destiny. To the outside world, Egypt became a wonder, a place of monuments, mysteries and exotic legends. To the Egyptians themselves, it became a shadow of what it once was. Their gods survived in whispers, their culture mixed with Greek, Roman, and later Christian influences. The land of eternity was now just another province. And yet, the story didn't end there, because beneath the sands, hidden in tombs, buried in temples, Egypt's secrets waited. Secrets the conquerors could never fully erase. Secrets that would survive long after Rome itself fell. And this leads us to the final mystery. The treasures, the wonders, the untold stories still buried beneath the desert. Egypt fell, its pharaohs silenced, its temples left in ruins, its gods abandoned, mocked or forgotten. But Egypt itself, Egypt never truly died. Because buried beneath the golden dunes, beneath the shifting sands of time, something was waiting. Not just bones, not just stone, but memory, secrets. A legacy too powerful to stay hidden forever. For centuries, travelers wandered through Egypt, staring in awe at the pyramids, sketching hieroglyphs they couldn't understand, whispering stories of curses and treasures. To them, Egypt was a graveyard of giants. Silent, eternal, untouchable, but in truth, the sand was only hiding what would one day rise again. Let's step into the year 1799. Napoleon marches into Egypt. His soldiers stumble upon the Rosetta Stone, a simple slab of black rock, scratched with strange writing. They don't realize it yet, but this stone holds the key to unlocking an entire civilization. When Jean-François Champollion finally cracked the code in 1822, it was as if the dead spoke again. The names of pharaohs forgotten for 2,000 years, Ramses, Thutmose, Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, echoed once more. The walls of temples spoke, the tombs sang, the silence was broken, and then came the age of discovery. Valley of the Kings, Karnak, Luxor, Abydos, archaeologists crawling through the dust, candles in hand, unsealing doors untouched since the days of the pharaohs. Some found empty tombs, robbed long ago. Others stumbled upon wonders that stunned the modern world. The most famous of all, Tutankhamun's tomb, unearthed in 1922 by Howard Carter. A golden mask, chariots, thrones, walls glowing with paintings of the boy king. After 3,000 years, Egypt's magic blazed back to life, dazzling the world. And here's the truth. Every discovery only deepened the mystery, because for everything we've found, countless treasures still lie hidden. The desert is vast, the Nile has shifted. Temples and cities remain buried beneath modern towns. Some believe we've uncovered only a fraction of Egypt's secrets. What lies beneath the sand? Perhaps another royal tomb untouched by looters. Perhaps the lost burial of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh. Perhaps scrolls, libraries, entire cities frozen in time. Or maybe answers to the questions that still haunt us. Who really built the pyramids? What knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and engineering did they possess? Did Akhenaten's vision shape future religions? Why did Egypt's golden age fade? The sands of Egypt do not give up their secrets easily, but every year archaeologists find more. Tombs with sealed doors, mummies with golden tongues, temples glowing with forgotten colors, and maybe that's the real magic of Egypt. It isn't just the past, it's the promise that the past still has more to say, because Egypt's story isn't finished. The pyramids still stand, the Sphinx still watches, the Nile still flows, and the desert still guards its hidden treasure. 3,000 years of pharaohs, empires that rose and fell, gods born, worshipped, and forgotten, conquerors who claimed eternity only to vanish, and through it all, Egypt endured, not as a ghost, not as a ruin, but as a riddle that still pulls us closer, still dares us to uncover the next chapter. And maybe that's why we can't look away, because deep down we know Egypt still has secrets left to tell. Secrets waiting for the next discovery. Secrets that may change everything we think we know about history. So the question is, when the sand finally gives up its last secret, what truth will we find? And will the world be ready for it? If this journey shocked you, hit that like button to make sure more people hear these forgotten stories. Subscribe if you want to uncover more hidden sides of history with us. And tell me in the comments, which Egyptian mystery do you want solved in your lifetime? Because the story of ancient Egypt isn't finished. And together we're still writing the next chapter.